In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will. All I have and call my own, you have given to me. To you, Lord, I return it. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace. That is enough for me. Amen. In the Father's
Amen.
name. Amen.
Ryan, would you mind spotlighting the honorees now? Okay, I'm going to welcome everyone again because we started recording after I forgot to tell Ryan to start recording. So welcome to this evening where we are getting to know our honorees for Hearts on Fire 2024. The theme for Hearts on Fire this year is celebrating hope, and we really believe that all of our honorees celebrate hope in their lives and in their work. Loyola Institute for Spirituality, we've been bringing spirituality to life for 26 years, and we're a Jesuit ministry rooted in Ignatian spirituality. And the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola form the basis of our vision, our mission, and our programs. Our board of directors created Hearts on Fire in 2003 to annually recognize outstanding Christians whose contributions to spirituality, community service, and Christian leadership have been inspired by their formation in the spiritual exercises. And we will be celebrating next Saturday, April 20th at Christ Cathedral. So now I'd love to introduce our honorees. We'll be giving 3 different awards, so I'll explain them briefly as well so you have some background. The Love in Action Award is presented each year to a person identified by the Loyola Institute staff and endorsed by the board, who collaborates with LIS in ministry throughout the year and who in doing so also serves the greater community. This year, we are honoring Mike Trujillo with this award. Mike is an indispensable and beloved member of the LIS community. He's a member of our board of directors, and he facilitates our 9-month 19th annotation of the spiritual exercises in daily life, as well as our first spiritual exercises 5-week program. He also serves as a spiritual companion to retreatants and has done so for the past 10 years. Mike tells us that Ignatian spirituality continues to be the foundation upon which he builds his relationship with God. He recently retired from 29 years of service as VP of Operations at Houdini Inc., where he oversaw the production of more than 125 million gift baskets throughout his career. Mike loves spending time with his spouse of 20 years, 5 siblings, 93-year-old mom and dad, and friends, and he refreshes his spirit while working in his garden, cooking, practicing yoga, swimming, and reading. And Mike is currently joining us live on location from Coachella. Our second award is the Writers Award in Spirituality, and it is given to someone who has demonstrated excellence in furthering the spiritual teachings of St. Ignatius of Loyola through writing. Dr. Nancy Pineda Madrid will be honored with this award this year. Dr. Nancy Pineda Madrid holds the T. Marie Chilton Chair of Catholic Theology at Loyola Marymount University, where she's taught since 2019. And she has taught both Lori and I, and we are so grateful to have had
You guys.
Previously, Dr. Nancy taught at Boston College's School of Theology and Ministry, and she earned her PhD in systematic and philosophical theology from the Graduate Theological Union. She's published 2 monographs, Suffering and Salvation in Ciudad Juarez, the first book to offer a theological interpretation of suffering and salvation in light of the tragic killing of women known as feminicide. Her most recent book, Theologizing in an Insurgent Key, Violence, Women, Salvation, develops further the groundwork for a reinterpretation of salvation in the shadow of violence against women. And her current book project advances a theological interpretation of the religious symbol of Our Lady of Guadalupe. She's also co-editor of 2 volumes, Hope, promise, possibility, and fulfillment, and the Holy Spirit setting the world on fire. She's president-elect of the Catholic Theological Society of America, which is the largest professional society of Catholic theologians in the world. And she's past president of the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the United States. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband, Larry Gordon, and has 2 grown stepchildren. The Hearts on Fire Award is awarded annually to an individual or an organization who is formed in Ignatian spirituality, who exemplifies the Ignatian ideal of finding God in all things and lives the spiritual exercises on a daily basis, who is engaged in the service of faith to others, whose sphere of influence is compatible with Ignatian ideals and aligns with the vision and mission of Loyola Institute for Spirituality. And this year, we are very proud to honor the Jesuit Restorative Justice Initiative, which is a pastoral ministry of restorative justice that strives to heal broken relationships with those who are incarcerated and their families, as well as victims of crimes and their families through prayer, education, and advocacy. JRJI has been facilitating restorative justice spiritual retreats using Ignatian meditation in California state prisons and juvenile halls since 2009. And through meditation based on the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, JRJI has been able to move the hearts of incarcerated communities and help them recognize God's presence in their lives. We'll be presenting the award to 4 JRJI staff members, so I'll tell you briefly about each of them. Father Mike Kennedy has dedicated his life to walking with the marginalized. He, as pastor at San Diego's Christ the King Parish, he co-founded the San Diego Organizing Project, advocating for social change in the parish's poor neighborhoods. He later co-founded Proyecto Pastoral in Los Angeles, aiding refugees and the undocumented. Following the 1989 assassinations of Jesuits, he worked with the Jesuit Refugee Service in El Salvador. And Father Mike is the founder and executive director of JRJI. Arturo Lopez was born in San Salvador, El Salvador, and has worked with youth both in Central America and the United States. After arriving in the US in 1983, Arturo became a longtime community organizer within immigrant and refugees communities from Central America and Mexico. He has led Christian-based communities in addressing social challenges using the meditation methods of St. Ignatius. Colin Price is a Jesuit regent and has worked with JRJI since September of 2023. He graduated from Gonzaga University, as did I, go Zags, and worked as a civil engineer in Spokane before entering the Jesuit novitiate in Culver City in 2018. And we're holding Jose Luis Plasencias in our prayers tonight as he is recovering, hopefully, from an illness. He's a 25-year-old native of Baldwin Park, California, the co-founder of a local grassroots collective, People United of BP, rooted in local law reform. He has supported children, youth, and families in underserved communities, including various parochial schools and churches as a behavioral therapist, primary school teacher, and youth minister. So thank you, this amazing panel of honorees. Thank you for being here with us today. So we will get started with our first question. How has Ignatian spirituality informed your work today? Who would like to start us off with an answer to that question?
Well, would you like us to do it and then it'll kind of be opened up and then we could go to specific individual? Would that help?
That's great.
I mean, because we have it kind of down.
Yeah, I would love it. Go for it.
I mean, so we got out. Who made the questions? They're really good.
Douglas Leal. Yep.
It's really good. So that you're kind of inspiration how this came about. Okay, and so it's very specific. It incorporates the questions, and we're going to give a story. So here we go. So for the last 30 years, we've been doing this type of work restorative justice, both in prisons and camps. To begin with, incorporating two of the questions, let me begin by saying Ignatius was a warrior. He was a warrior of life. I and Colin and Arturo tonight would like to talk about what this means, a warrior of life. I would like to introduce you to a man called Eric Fabian. Eric Fabian, I met 10 years ago in a prison that he was a leader of his yard. He was in the Mexican Mafia. And he came to one of our retreats and he didn't even know why he was walking into the room, like it happened so many times. They just walk in a door and they're like, what am I doing in here? Most of the time in GP yards and prisons, people don't even go into chapels. So Eric Fabian, he was like Ignatius. I tell you, he was vain. He was worldly. He, out of his own arrogance, out of his own inner demon, he killed a man. And ever since then, he, like Ignatius, was learning what it is to deal with how do we make our weaknesses into our strengths. So we can see many examples of people like him, but we've chosen him tonight because he, of all the people after 30 years, is most like St. Ignatius of Loyola, that we hope to point out, the transformation, how he uses it for other people, a man for others. So profoundly, he is so great that he has written his own book called Seeds of Transformation. He's working on the second book that we'll explain tonight. So our thing is to empower people through the exercises and through contemplation that they can pass it on. So when you go to different prisons, people will know who JRJI is, and it's a way of their own inner transformations. So Eric Fabian for us is this. One of the questions that I really liked, and it got me to think, and let me just end with this part. We live in a culture today, excuse me, a throwaway culture. And if our faith really does lead us, which it does, that God was found on the cross, the least place we'd ever expect to find God. A crucified criminal, humiliated, spit upon. Our experience during these 30 years is that paradoxically, modern day mystics, modern day mystical writers are not necessarily in the places we think they are. That we hope to show you a little bit tonight using some of those questions. A warrior of light, Ignatius of Loyola. Eric Fabian, a warrior of light. We would hope to introduce you into a profile of a modern day warrior of light who, through his own being, has taken on the challenge to be a warrior of light through his own mistakes and lead other people into complete transformation. And 40 of those people will be with us that night. No, okay, then, so this is the introduction. So this is just the big panorama. And then I would like to hand it over to Arturo.
So we've got some materials here. So as Mike mentioned, Eric wrote a book. It's called Seeds of Transformation, and it's the story of his conversion experience. It's basically, as Mike said, from somebody who was violent to somebody who is now a healer. And writing is a big part of what we do as JRJI. It's one of the most important tools for people going through their change, through their transformation, to look back on their experiences in the past, to remember and to connect that remembrance to where they are now and where God has been and where God is now in their lives. And so Eric is an example of somebody who through the meditations, the retreats, and the writings, has found the presence of God within himself, within his past, within his present, and is carrying that out to people now, in the present, and in the future.
This is Eric. And this past weekend, well, I know Eric for the last 10 years too, like Father Mike. And during this, I remember all these 10 years on transformation and healing of Eric. And when he got the release, he was deported. And he's in Tijuana now. And after 24 years. And one of the parts that we said is, well, we walked with Eric during these 10 years. Why we don't visit him? So this past weekend, we went with Colin and visit Eric in Tecate. He drove to Tecate and we met with family friends that we have right there. And you know, we had a very good sharing with him. He shared many stories in prison, and he shared the new stories in Tijuana that is totally different. The situation of one person who is released right here in California, and someone who was released and deported to Mexico is another different experience. So, but talking about hope, even that he was deported, he has a wonderful spirit to continue his goal in his life of transformation, San Ignacio. He's involved with helping people in different places, in recovery centers, to help them to get out of those situations. That one. The second one is he wants to help people who will be deported in the future, how they can arrive and find different resources right there, because that is one of the most difficult situations for them. And he's looking for those parts, how he can find those resources and help them. And the last one is how he will continue supporting people inside to the prison for those who want to change or healing or forgiveness or transformation through the correspondence. And he want to have that connection with them from Tijuana to here. And so now, I want to talk about that we hire him.
So we brought him onto our staff these last couple of weeks, and he's been helping us with our correspondence program. When people do writings based on the meditations and turn them in, he's helping us type them up and respond to them, and establish a line of communication from inside and outside the prison to help people deepen their process of transformation and healing.
San Ignacio, Tijuana.
And lastly, we would just like to kind of, our collective feeling about this is that we could pick 1 million people. We could choose a different ways of doing it, talking about our method, but we really want to talk about one person who has so incorporated a warrior of light that rather than looking at that as something that his own past, being a gang leader, having been responsible for killing someone, etc., those are the very strengths that's making him so effective in dealing with the people he's dealing with. So what we would like to say is that there's a an ancient saying from the Desert Fathers, and it says, if you ask someone how you know if your prayer life is advancing or your relationship with God is growing, the Desert Fathers always say the same answer. Look at how they live their lives. Anyone can say they are mystics, close to God. They're living in divine union with God. But if their interactions in their daily lives are dismal, or there's no joy in them, no giving of self, or their actions show a lot of self-centeredness, this certainly is not what the Desert Fathers were talking about, what it means to be close to God. So we picked the warrior of life, Eric Fabian, incorporating a different paradigm that in the place where everybody would think that these people are throwaway, they have no capacity to go inward, they have no capacity. He has 5 AAs, gonna get his bachelor's degree, and has done amazing things. That's a whole nother story. So basically, we would like to end this by saying, the Desert Fathers are right. Eric, you continue what it is to be a man for others, a person filled with God. Rather than taking the easy ways that so many people do to get money, to be secure. Once again, we can judge you in your own transformation by the spiritual exercises, contemplation, your writings that you exhibit. You show that life is a gift, along with all the graces you received. And again, you say, I don't deserve this. You're right. You're right. None of us deserves it. But you are called and are being called that you are on the right path. You just lost your baby. That was a big one. I was the only one that knew that he was even pregnant. And the day that Colin and Artur went there, they listened to what it was like. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is right. Cheap grace is not for the ones that follow an easy path. Cheap grace will quickly disappear. This man is not following quick, easy grace, but a grace to follow the master who is willing to take a turn to carry the cross up the hill to Calvary. So, St. Ignatius of Loyola, we thank you that you have brought us what it means to make this a better world. And Eric, we thank you as a follower of Ignatius, because you write, you move, you make people cry. You go with people that are Pisces in prisons where everyone else doesn't, but you have a heart. You show us what it is to be mystical, contemplative in a world of self-centeredness, of power, and of competitions. Eric, we pray for your baby, your family, because gracias a Dios, you are now a free man. Inside and outside.
Thank you. I hope we all have a chance to read more of Eric's work and learn more about what he's doing in the world.
Thank you.
Nancy or Mike, does that prompt any thoughts for you, or do you have anything that you want to share about Ignatian spirituality or how you see Ignatian spirituality navigating some of the troubles in our world, or
I mean, I can go ahead if you like, if that's okay, Mike. I'm very moved by what you all just shared, and especially because how much of it concerns kind of the experience of living along the border. And I want to pick up a few of these ideas because frankly, because I grew up along the border. I grew up in El Paso, Texas. I'm second generation in the United States. My parents were both born here, but all four of my grandparents are from Mexico. And growing up in El Paso, Texas, I often was just confronted with the whole notion in Ignatian spirituality of finding God in all things, and the recognizing that I'm in the presence of God. And that haunted me constantly because I saw every day as I would drive up and down Interstate 10, which parallels the border, the contrast between wealth and poverty. And you'd see it with the casas de cartón that were all in Ciudad Juárez. And I kept being haunted by the question, why was I born on this side of the border and not the south side? And how my life would be very different. And you were talking about, you know, your compañero Eric, and what he was remarking that he doesn't deserve what he has found. And I remember thinking that too, you know, in my own life, that I didn't deserve to be born on the north side of the border. And yet you see just the challenge that people have on the other side. And so trying to understand, where is God? If I'm in the presence of God and I'm trying to find God in all things, where is God in this absolute contrast, and people who you know, who basically they die because of the conditions that they're living in. And that was true for me even in high school. And then I think coming to Loyola Marymount, I got introduced to spiritual direction. I went on silent retreats, and that really helped me tremendously, because I started to become aware of Ignatian spirituality in a more overt and explicit way through spiritual direction, which I consider to this day to be probably the most courageous thing that I've ever done, even though it's probably the most private thing. Most people don't know necessarily that you know, that this is something that I do, but courageous because it pushed me to do all kinds of things in life and to find God in these questions of mine. And I volunteered as well at Annunciation House, which, as we know, has been the press a lot these days. And I was a volunteer there in the early 1980s, when there were about 40 or 50 migrants in the house from El Salvador and Guatemala. And I remember the Border Patrol coming and trying to get in the house. One time I was there alone, and they wanted to come and search the house, and everybody in the house, there were probably 40 people there. They all scattered as they saw the Border Patrol coming, into closets, under beds, and there was an enormous amount of fear. And I remember being scared myself, because they came to the door, and I basically said, you can't come in if you don't have a warrant to search this house, realizing what would happen if they did come in. And thankfully they didn't. But again, you know, where is God in this? And then as I was got into theology, and the eruption of the killing of women, feminicide, and there's discussion about las mujeres desechables, right? The disposable women. So you talk about people who are kind of thrown away, and these women whose lives, because they're largely the poor, their lives are seen as not counting. And then coming to a connection in terms of this question of finding God in all things, to realize that what we have going on here is a crucifixion, and that the crucifixion of Jesus Christ takes on flesh for me in the brutal killing of these women in Juarez, and now tragically, since this started, really in many places in Latin America, many countries of Latin America. And so wanting to try to get inside through the imagination, my imagination, and feeling a Jesuit call to the use of imagination to come into to seeing the gospel story in many ways playing out before me, and trying to figure out where I am in this and to discern that. And in many ways, the Jesuit practice of discernment, a discernment of spirits and where we are led to, has led me to talk about the crucifixion that these women are experiencing, and to shine a spotlight on that, so that hopefully that there's an awareness of the tragedy that is going on, and a desire to create, a zealous desire to create a more just world. And the only way that happens is if we're present. I think if we try to be present to those who are suffering in this world. And I credit really Ignatian spirituality for helping me to walk this journey and to sort out, to the best of my ability, what I ought to be doing in the midst of this. Especially given I grew up with a great love of the city of Ciudad Juarez well before the violence that we see in the press in the last 20 years. So those are some of the ways that Ignatian spirituality has informed my work in the choice to really look at women and the killing of women in Juarez and throughout Latin America. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Michael, Arturo, and Colin as well. Beautiful stories and experiences of your life, and how Ignatian spirituality shapes and moves and is used by you, in a practical way to minister, to reach out, and to work as healers and empathizers, and people to serve those that are such in need. So thank you for your sharing and your stories. My background is a bit different. Hearing you, I feel like you guys are such in the trenches on things, in the ministries and the issues that you're working with. For me, Ignatian spirituality has been, the core out of, how I've wanted to live my life for so long. And for as long as I can remember, I guess, Loyola High School, before I even knew what was happening to me, and these Jesuits were having a hand in forming me. But and it continued over the years. And for me, the practicality of Ignatian spirituality, helping us to become the persons who God created us to be, and to use the gifts that God has given us to try to respond back to God, give back to God the love that God has showered upon us. So I continue to pray and think and work in that kind of context throughout my life, my career, and over the last 12 years, the ministry, of companioning with others in the spiritual exercises and the retreat process. So something that you guys both are talking about from both groups, both, Nancy and you guys also, responding to some of the big challenges in the world that we face. And that was one of the questions that were asked of us as we came to this meeting tonight. And I think about some different challenges. Yours are very real and involve a lot of just amazing coming together of spirits to absorb and to respond in the way you guys do. I've been really troubled, you know, and I'm sure others have as well, with just the, you know, the way that our culture has turned and changed over the last several years. So much divisiveness and so much anger, so much polarization, and it's troubled me because I'm a kind of a person that's a collaborator and basically a peaceful. I don't like confrontation, and to find our world kind of blowing up into a confrontational world where you can't do much without somebody getting in your face and arguing with you. And so I've been taking that with me in prayer and in the context of Ignatian spirituality. And actually, I have a really good spiritual director for the last several years, and we talk about this a lot because we talk about how it divides not just people in our society that we don't know, but it's also divides our friends and our families, and it causes anger and arguments and stuff. And I tried to look towards Ignatian spirituality and say, well, what is our response? You know, how can we you know, move in a direction that is more healing? I kind of think about like our society is like a pendulum, and this pendulum is swung so far to one side where people are just against each other so much. And I keep wondering, where is that voice? Who is the leader? Who is the person that's going to start to shift the pendulum back in another direction? What's it going to take? You know, in history, sometimes it's taken a major disaster or something. We certainly don't want something like that to pull us all together again. But somehow we have to consider what actions we can take. And so for me, Ignatian spirituality in the last couple of years in particular have focused on this, I don't know, an illness in society, a discomfort, a sickness in a way. And when we think about peacemakers, so how do you become a peacemaker? Certainly what both of you two are doing, your groups, Sergei and Nancy, and your work is drawing attention to areas of hurt and areas of need, and offering ideas and solutions and awareness, most of all, to pull at people's hearts. So you become to think about, how can I respond to these things? I don't really have any answers. It's something that I'm, you know, seeking, and the type of ministry that I'm working with at Loyola Institute is, you know, it's basically the 19th annotation and the 18th annotation and these spiritual exercises that we offer. So it's an ongoing process, and that's what I do love about Ignatian spirituality, is that it's God's creation is continual and continuous and constantly trying to form us. And so I keep trying to probe these questions about this world and what's happening, and what do we do? How can we impact it? How can we start to swing the pendulum back? Try to be a peacemaker, try to be a healer. And it sounds easy, but then I go home to my mom and dad's house on a Thursday evening, as I usually do, and my dad is kind of like polar opposite of my views. And so I may have several days of nice prayer and thoughts and contemplations and imaginations, and I feel like I'm doing pretty good. And then I go talk to my dad, and I'm in an argument within like 30 seconds of getting into the house. And it's so frustrating. And I'm sure maybe others of you have experienced that type of thing, that this thing that's happening in our culture is really come home. It's really come home. And it's with the person who, you know, one of the people I love the most, that we get into these arguments, and we make up and all that kind of stuff. But the challenge of trying to be a peacemaker and a collaborator and a healer in thought is one thing, and in action is another. So I think, Nancy, you brought up earlier discernment of spirits, and I think of examine. And of course, it's such a powerful prayer because it helps us to come back to notice those things that are working at us, that are moving us towards God, moving us away from God. And in a particular examine, you want to look at a particular thing. And so my particular examine has been in this, you know, culture wars, if you want to call it that, or whatever it is that's happening. And I try to notice when these emotions and feelings are coming up, what triggers them, and how to kind of nip it in the bud before it gets out of control. So so that's kind of how, Ignatian spirituality in a nutshell is at work for me right now. How do we model this? How do we share it with others? You guys are in the trenches. You got people in need all around you. You know, some of us just, our lives aren't quite in that direction. So we try to model it around the people that we're with each day. I love the people at Loyola Institute, the associates and the people that come in for companioning, and we can do it with them, and we can do it in the day-to-day actions of our lives. And yeah, I think that's good for this moment and this question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What fascinates me about what you all were talking about is in the power of Ignatian spirituality, what I see you all doing is responding. What Mike talks about is, in some ways, I think some of us have become numb to what's going on in the world. And I think Ignatian spirituality helps nudge us to feel more. Like you were talking about, Mike, like these feelings come up. Where are these feelings coming from? And I think part of this is, can we get in touch with these feelings and have this deep compassion that we hear about from JRJI? And can we have to know what we have to be able to express imaginations to imagine a world that is different. And I think that's the gift that Ignatian spirituality has given me, and the work that you all do also is how my imagination can expand to know that these things are going on in the world. And then I pray about them deeply and see what I'm nudged to do next. And I think all of you are these beacons of light to help us expand our imaginations. And I see that in the day-to-day and in the big projects, the books, and the retreats that you're doing. So I just thank you so much for that. I would love to open up to questions if anybody out there has questions that they'd like to ask our honorees. You can just unmute and ask, or you can put it in the chat if you don't want to ask. But what questions do you have? If any, I can ask more. I have more questions too, but does anybody have a burning question or comment after what they've heard? Okay,
I have a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
great.
Okay. I just wanted to pick up on what you're talking about with regard to imagination and Ignatian spirituality, because in what I learned from Ignatian spirituality, I think one of the greatest gifts for me has been using the imagination to locate myself inside of a passage of scripture that breaks open for me through the affect, through my feelings, right? It can break open new realities. So I wonder, as I was listening both to to what Mike shared and what you were sharing as well, Laura, and actually certainly, from the JRJI folks as well, that are we not living maybe in a moment where we're kind of in that moment right before the raising of Lazarus, or we're longing for the raising of Lazarus. I was thinking about this, right? We just had this the week before Easter, the week before Palm Sunday, the raising of Lazarus, and wondering how we are bound in so many ways, and the bandages that we carry, not only individually, but as a society. And maybe if we can use the image of, come out, Lazarus, if that breaks open for us in some way, on a prayer level and on a transformative level, a way to imagine something that takes us to a different place from what we see in our world. And I just throw that out there because I think the way Ignatius used imagination with the scriptures, for me, has been absolutely extraordinary. So I think that's a really helpful resource that we have in Ignatian spirituality.
Absolutely. Mike, did you want to say something too?
I love that imagery, Nancy. Lazarus and the bandages and throwing them off and recreating into something new. So thank you for sharing that. I think the only thing is maybe it's a change in direction of our conversation, and maybe it's not. But one of the great questions that was asked of us to think about for tonight is if Ignatius of Loyola was alive today, 500 years later, what would possibly be different in the way he wrote the spiritual exercises, or if there would, what changes might he have made? I loved that question. I'd be interested to hear what a couple of our honorees would respond to that one.
Lori, you may have thoughts on that as well. I think Lori stands out to call you out.
Sure. I mean, I could pitch in a few things here if you, one thing I think that's so interesting about Ignatius, and Mike Kennedy, you started with this with regard to the cannonball story, right? Of Ignatius and his own conversion process. And part of the early time of the Jesuits were these theodramas. And I wonder if Ignatius, if he was here today, would try to foreground and emphasize the whole theological dramas that we have. And I say that as somebody who's Mexican American, who has been in communities that are celebrating or reenacting the Pasión de Jesucristo, the Via Crucis, Los Reyes Magos, right? The Passion of Jesus Christ, the Way of the Cross, the Three Kings, La Virgen de Guadalupe, right? The Virgin of Guadalupe, these particular transformation stories. And I think it's in coming into the drama of those that we are invited into a conversion and a deepening of the zeal for the gospel. And so I think if Ignatius was alive today, I wonder if he wouldn't want to really focus attention there. It's just that's what occurred to me on this question.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I like that. The one thing that I thought of when I was thinking about that question is Ignatius and the use of the word love. He doesn't use the word love very often, and I kind of wonder sometimes if he was a product of his day back then, if it was this warrior guy that maybe thought that love was too touchy-feely, or he equated it so much to romantic love that maybe he didn't want to confuse the issue a little bit. And I think of the first principle and foundation, and because my context is always with the spiritual exercises, and he says, our purpose in life is to praise, reverence, and serve God. And I wonder if these days, in this day and age, you might include the word love, to praise, reverence, serve, and love God. And because we have like 4 John, or 1 John 4, where God is love. I mean, we know that God is love. We love that God is love, and our response is to love God back. And he kind of comes to this at the end during the contemplation to attain divine love, but it's a little harsh at the same time. We kind of just covered this in our 19th annotation, so it's kind of fresh in my mind right now. And he says that love is more in actions than in words. So that's not exactly warm and fuzzy. It is nice, but sometimes I think Anthony de Mello somewhere said something to the effect that it's nice to hear nice words also, that you are loved, and that the love is a mutual sharing of what one has, and that's good, but it takes us all the way to the end of the exercises to get there. And so I just wonder sometimes if maybe he would have used the word love a little bit more in the context of how we use it today. Yeah, that was just a thought that came up to me. I had another one as well, but we're getting on in this hour, so maybe anybody else might have some thoughts about what Ignatius might say if he was doing a revision these days.
I think very quickly that Ignatius would be leaning into the spirit of Magus and give more credence and deference to the women who educated him and who provided support financially to him to get his ministry of companions going. I truly think that he would be more generous in seeing that, because there's a liberative effect that the exercises have on everybody. And like Father Mike was saying, it's something where you receive it and you have to give it. You can't help but give it and share it to other people. And so women are natural cultivators, incubators of life, and they give their lives over freely, as they did to Ignatius. And I think leaning into Magus, he would extend that to others, to other women, and be more inclusive in that way.
Beautiful. Thank you. JRJI folks, any thoughts on, did you want to contribute at all on that question, how the exercises might be different?
Well, you know, there's a word in Spanish called coyuntura. And coyuntura means, like, when I would always go to meetings in Latin America, you spend the whole first day with coyuntura. In other words, what's the concrete reality in which we live? And so, I mean, I think the whole wisdom of the exercises, that in itself is, in one sense, it's, how can I put this? It had a coyuntura for his age, and the wisdom is still there. But, you know, the language, some of the language, but it's more than that. I think what Nancy was saying about, it kind of moved me. So when we do the exercises and we give them, it's called breaking open the word, and they have to write it. At the same time, we have sociodramas. So I think part of the coyuntura today is that people want something fast on their phones and everything else. So we have, I don't know if you have one of those books. So we have a, this is the breaking open the word. And then and then this one here is plays. So every single time we have a retreat, we have a 20-minute play about forgiveness, sexual abuse, and it's healing, forgiveness. It's not something you have to invent. The coyuntura is a different language, but look at people's lives. You know, I mean, read the studies of what phones are doing to people's, that new book that's out, what people it's doing. So the coyuntura is so different that it also means that there has to be practical tools that we are doing the exercises can bring them closer. So we have a book, we don't have it here. Is it the very end one there? And it's, well, so we've written all these plays. So and they love it and they get into it. And then they ask each other and they engage in it. And it's one way of opening up it's breaking open the bread. You know, and I know it's very Latin American, you know, but it's like, it works. It just works. You know, and I think so many times we're afraid to think that the coyuntura always has to be the same coyuntura. It doesn't. You open up with a prayer and you do this and everybody sits down. Break it open. Do something. I mean, and they love to do it. If you don't do a play there, you're dead meat. I mean, it's true. And they get to know each other. You know, there's an Actors Guild thing that, anyway, so. But it's a good question.
I love that, doing what works.
Yeah. Yeah. And they respond to it and they emotionally get into it.
Well, and we're hearing even beyond just culturally, but age-wise, the younger generation wants a faith that is not rooted in intellect. They want a faith that is rooted in action,
Right.
emotion. And I think that Ignatian spirituality really checks those boxes for people and can really be a tool to deepen the faith of those who are distracted by their phones and things as well. So
Yeah.
finding the ways that work is key. Well, we
Something,
are
something
watching the
something that I really appreciate in our Ignatian heritage is dealing with negative emotions. I mean, I know this is something that, modern psychology will go into, but Ignatius was, people claim that he was pretty good at psychology even before it was invented as a science. And everything that we've been talking about acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of negativity. But we also say that we're finding God in all things. So that there's a spark of the divine in so many of the things that we wish to flee from, to reject, to not deal with, to deny. And that, it has to do with opening your eyes to the reality and then trying to get into it. And that's what drama helps us do, I suppose,
Yeah. It does.
to discover and to put on the table, to put on the carpet, all this negativity, and to come to it with the knowledge that we're loved and that God is present. And then to see how what seems so absolutely horrid and pointless and to be fled from and to be rejected can be embraced. Because it's all beyond, God's love is greater than sin or what's lacking or so forth, Anyway, that's something that I found in my own life helpful, and of course the examine of consciousness is very helpful that way, because then you say, oh boy, I've really been in a funk, or desolation or whatever, and you become aware of different things that are drawing you away from God, and yet maybe God is there. We just have to sit with it a while.
Yeah.
I have a question, very short. Is coyuntura is the term?
Uh-huh.
Like coyuntura, like the joint?
Well, it would be like that, but it would be like,
Well, where is it?
How do you spell it? ¿Cómo se escribe?
It's a-
The reality of the, any
Sí,
Wait.
pero la palabra coyuntura es
Oh.
como la coyuntura del árbol, de los huesos.
It would be conjuncture, a conjuncture.
Conjuncture.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
the word.
coyuntura.
That's the word.
When
Okay,
things come
conjuncture.
together that are
Sí.
real and present, conjunction.
Yeah, well, it's the joints of the body are coyunturas. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Gracias.
But so it'd be like going to a meeting and you're talking and no one's, they haven't got the onda, they're just talking from here. But if you get a coyuntura and say, the military has invaded the university. There's more people that are dying of this. There's more people in prison. We have, and the political situation has never been worse, etc. Then you begin this discussion. So you begin with that type of coyuntura.
or like every year that we visit, every year is different and see this year. So we can talk about that different year, how we can work with the communities inside and how we can work with the CDCR to
Totally different.
Totally different. So depending situation, that is the way that we can work through the spirituality. Took time to discuss, but we have to do it, you know.
It's a great word.
Mhm.
I like it because I think it gets us out of the tendency to want to stop the movement
Uh-huh.
in life. You know, we would like, and unfortunately, religion and sometimes spirituality keep us, you might say, stuck in a repetition. But that's not Christian spirituality, because Christian spirituality is about the pathway, the pilgrimage that we're on, therefore the movement that we're on, therefore the fact that as we move, we're going to keep seeing a different landscape. We'd like to keep the same landscape maybe, but the landscape keeps changing because we're moving. You know, it's kind of simple, elementary, but when you are looking for the coyuntura, it means that your eye are wide open,
Mhm.
you know, to reality.
Yeah, I like that. And don't you think a part of it too is like, I don't think we mentioned it tonight, but it's something that I thought of when I didn't read everything I wrote, but to me, one of the beauties of Jesuits and Ignatian spirituality is the mutuality of it. And that for us to think that we are the givers and givers, and we always come back and say, oh my God, if they had any idea what happened within us today, and they say, oh, we're so glad you traveled, we go like, I mean, sorry, but I mean, the mutuality. So there's something so deep there when we don't see ourselves as, we don't go and preach to them and tell them they're sinners, and blah, blah, blah. But it's a collective endeavor in which we're all on the same playing field. We aren't the gurus that know everything, and you're these ignorant people in prison, and but it's, and I mean, it's really difficult to explain. I wouldn't trade my job for anything in the world. I wouldn't. I mean, no one gets that type of grace. It's given. I mean, you can't get it. And so that's part of our heritage as Jesuits, is that we are mutual and we are able to enter into those type of relationships and conversations and spiritual direction, etc. I mean, it's a gift, but I do think mutuality is really important. We're gifted, I think, more than we give them, but that's my own humble thing.
That's interesting because I've heard both Mike and Nancy say similar things about work that they do.
Yes, no, absolutely. You know, I kind of pinch myself all the time that I'm making a living doing the work that I do. I mean, it's hard work, but it's so deeply rewarding. It's such a gift. So it's yes, exactly. I mean, it's just wonderful.
Mike, I thought you were just saying that to me, I think last week or something, about how the spiritual every time you companion someone in this spiritual exercises, it's such a gift for you, right?
I remember another director one day in sharing about how the gifts he was getting from one of his retreatants. He was like, and I thought to myself, who's directing who here? Because he was getting so much from it. It's like, and it's sushi pay. It's like, you know, God is so generous. God won't be outdone in generosity. Give me your love and your grace. That's all I need. And it's just abundant when we're in this kind of work, that that it is mutual. And sometimes it seems like we do get more than we give. And it's amazing.
Well, we're coming close. We're past 8 o'clock, so I would love to offer, if anyone has last comments or a last question, before we close out, I'd invite you to speak up.
Good.
I have a question for Nancy about, as a Latina myself, Mexicana. I'm just wondering, how are young Latina women in your classrooms and in your contact, I don't know, receiving the kind of message that are in your books? What do you see as their response, either to the message or what is happening, that, you know, causes these, you know, all of the aches and pains of the kinds of things that you're, you know, referred to in what you're working with? So just some thoughts on that.
I think those who, you know, we have some students who are born and raised in Mexico, and then they come here and are in school, and some of them have been in tears, and I don't think it's so much the work that I'm doing in particular. I don't take that personally. I think what's going on is that it's so rare that they see any representation of their experience, you know, and so I'm providing a representation, and it's the rarity of that kind of just blows some of them away, because it's just not their experience in a theological world. So that's part of what I see, and in that I take that to be about you know, the importance of having many more Latinas who are doing theology, because we need many voices, you know, doing a lot of different parts of this conversation. So that's one thing I see. I think some also find it almost a disbelief, like, you're doing, like, wait a second, you know, like, how does this work? You know, like, they don't even believe that it's possible that I would be doing what I'm doing, because it's so outside of their imagination that it seems unreal. And again, it's not about me, it's simply about the circumstances. And I just happen to be the person on it, you know. I mean, I think anyone else in my situation would have a similar experience. So I think that matters a lot, and especially for women, because women, we need in the Catholic tradition to really shift the visibility of women in all kinds of different ways. I was very struck by what Lori was saying about this, about Ignatius and women in the role of women. I think that's just so on target, you know, and women are hungry for that. They just are. So that, I don't know if that helps to. And one woman I know she told me she had lost I think either a sister or a cousin in Mexico to feminicide. And she just was stunned that one could take that reality and talk about it from a theological perspective. And I think it really struck her, because it's not usually what we do in theology, you know. And I think, as I think about that, Johann Baptist Metz, a very famous Jesuit, he wrote a piece titled Christology after Auschwitz. You know, so we have to think through our Christological imagination very differently after World War II, the Nazis, Auschwitz. And I, in many ways, think we need the same thing with regard to the violence against women. And that's just so critical. And in my more recent book, one part of research that really struck me is that the two countries in the world with the highest gross number of Catholics, just in terms of raw numbers, Brazil and Mexico, the two countries in the world with the most serious numbers of victims of feminicide in the world, Brazil and Mexico. So like that, there may be no causal relationship, but boy, if that's not a wake-up call, you know. So anyway, it's just kind of where I am with it. Thank you for the question. Thanks, Ellen.
I think we should have webinar part 2 and we can focus on that. I love it, Nancy. Thank you for the question. Any last questions or thoughts before we close?
Well, Laura, this is Regina. I think we could stay all night asking questions, sharing our ideas and hopes like that. But I just like to tell you and everybody that I'm so honored to be a part of this community. There's such a faith and actions and hope. So I thank you very much and looking forward to have a second or meeting you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. We're honored that you are a part of this community. Thank you so much. Well, thank you to our honorees. Thank you, Father Mike, Colin, Arturo. Thank you, Dr. Nancy. Thank you, Mike. We're so grateful that we're so grateful for the people you are and for the work that you are doing in this world. We're grateful that St. Ignatius has inspired all of us to be here. And we're so glad that we can honor you and celebrate you next Saturday at Hearts on Fire. We can't wait to see you. Thank you for
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
You know.
God bless you.